His own son ignored him for 2 years without a single explanation. But when he finally arrived at his son's mansion, a terrified maid whispered only one sentence: "Run before it's too late." What he uncovered inside would expose a shocking conspiracy that had destroyed countless families. Watch until the end, and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories. My name is Kaylin Voren, and for 2 years, I lived as though my only son had erased me from his life without explanation. Every morning I checked my phone before making coffee, hoping to see his name on the screen. Every evening I convinced myself that tomorrow might be different. It never was. Birthdays passed. Christmas came and went twice. My letters were returned unopened. My voicemail messages remained unheard. Friends stopped asking about Ronan because they could see the disappointment in my face every time his name was mentioned. I never imagined that silence could become so heavy, yet it slowly settled into every corner of my life until loneliness felt ordinary. Then one rainy Thursday morning, everything changed because of a single envelope resting inside my mailbox. The envelope had no return address. My hands trembled as I recognized Ronan's handwriting before I even opened it. The neat strokes of each letter were unmistakable. For a long moment I simply stared at my own name written across the front, wondering if I had imagined it. Finally, I broke the seal and unfolded the paper inside. There was only one short message: "Dad, please come home. I need to see you." That was all. No explanation. No apology. No reason for disappearing. Just 6 simple words that instantly pulled me back into the role of a father who had never truly stopped waiting. I sat alone at my kitchen table for nearly an hour, reading the letter again and again. Part of me believed it was genuine. Another part feared someone was playing a cruel joke. During those 2 years I had replayed every conversation Ronan and I had ever shared, searching for some hidden mistake that could explain why he abandoned me. We had argued before, like every family does, but never about anything serious enough to justify complete silence. Before disappearing, he had been successful, thoughtful, and determined to build his own investment company. He always called every Sunday evening without fail. Then one day the calls stopped. When I drove to his previous apartment, I learned he had moved without leaving any forwarding address. Even his closest friends claimed they didn't know where he had gone. Now I finally had an address: Blackridge Estate. The property was nearly 6 hours away from my home, hidden beyond a quiet mountain town I had only visited once many years ago. I considered calling first, but the letter contained no phone number. I searched online and found almost nothing about the estate except an old photograph showing a large stone mansion surrounded by forest. It looked peaceful, but photographs rarely captured what people tried to hide. The next morning I packed a small travel bag, locked my house and began the long drive. Rain followed me for the first 2 hours before fading into gray clouds that stretched endlessly across the sky. Highway traffic slowly gave way to narrow country roads lined with tall pine trees. Gas stations became less frequent. Houses disappeared until the landscape felt almost empty. The farther I traveled, the stronger the uneasy feeling in my chest became. I told myself it was simply anxiety after 2 years without answers, yet something deeper kept warning me that this journey would not end the way I expected. Late in the afternoon I reached the entrance to Blackridge Estate. Massive iron gates stood between tall stone pillars, each fitted with expensive security cameras that silently tracked every movement. I frowned. Ronan had always valued privacy, but this level of security seemed excessive. A guard stepped from a nearby booth, politely asked for my name, then checked a digital tablet before allowing the gates to swing open. As I drove through, I noticed additional cameras mounted along the driveway and discreet sensors hidden among carefully trimmed hedges. Every detail suggested planning, control, and constant observation. The mansion finally came into view at the end of the winding road. It was larger than I had imagined, its dark windows reflecting the fading afternoon light. Several luxury vehicles were parked outside. Yet the house itself felt strangely quiet. No music drifted through the open spaces. No laughter echoed from inside. The silence surrounding the estate reminded me less of a family home and more of a carefully managed institution. I parked near the entrance and stepped out of my car. Before I reached the front door, it opened quietly from the inside. A young woman wearing a simple black and white maid's uniform greeted me with a respectful smile that never reached her eyes. Mr. Voren, she said softly. We've been expecting you. Her name tag read Nearest Vale. She took my coat with practiced movements, but as she leaned closer, her fingers suddenly wrapped around my wrist with surprising strength. Her expression remained calm for anyone watching nearby, yet I felt her hand trembling. Without lifting her eyes toward mine, she whispered so quietly I almost missed the words. Don't go inside. Run before it's too late. Before I could respond, she released my wrist, straightened my coat, and walked deeper into the mansion as though nothing had happened. I stood frozen at the entrance, staring after her while a cold feeling spread through my chest. Every instinct told me to turn around, return to my car, and drive away before discovering whatever secret waited beyond those polished wooden doors. Instead, I stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the heavy front doors closed behind me with a quiet mechanical click that echoed through the entrance hall. I glanced over my shoulder almost instinctively. The sound was ordinary enough, yet after Nearest's warning, even something as simple as a closing door felt unsettling. The mansion's interior was elegant beyond anything I had expected. Marble floors stretched beneath crystal chandeliers. Large paintings covered the walls, and every piece of furniture appeared carefully selected to impress visitors. Despite its beauty, the house felt strangely lifeless. There were no family photographs, no personal decorations, nothing that suggested my son actually lived there. It looked more like the headquarters of a luxury corporation than a home. Father. The familiar voice pulled me from my thoughts. I turned and saw Ronan standing at the far end of the hall. For one brief moment, relief overwhelmed every doubt. He looked healthy. His posture was confident, and he wore an expensive navy suit tailored perfectly to his frame. His hair was shorter than before, and there were faint lines around his eyes that hadn't existed 2 years earlier. Time had changed him, but he was still my son. I walked toward him with a smile I had imagined countless times over the past 2 years. Before I could speak, he stepped forward and hugged me. It should have been the happiest moment of my life. Instead, something immediately felt wrong. His embrace lasted exactly 3 seconds. Not a second longer. Not a second shorter. When he stepped back, he smiled politely, but there was no warmth behind it. His eyes studied my face as though checking whether I matched an old photograph instead of greeting someone he had missed. It's good to see you, Dad, he said evenly. I waited for him to continue, to apologize, to explain, to tell me why he had vanished without a word. Instead, he simply gestured toward the hallway. Dinner is almost ready. Everyone is waiting. Everyone. The word lingered in my mind as we walked through the mansion together. I've tried calling you hundreds of times, I finally said. I know. I wrote letters. I know. You disappeared for 2 years. I understand. His answers were calm, almost rehearsed. Every sentence ended before any real conversation could begin. It was as though invisible boundaries had been placed around every subject that actually mattered. We entered a massive dining room where 6 people were already seated around an unusually long table. I recognized none of them. They rose politely as Ronan introduced each guest. They're members of my advisory team. Advisory team? The phrase sounded unusual in a private home. One woman specialized in estate management. Another claimed to oversee wellness planning. 2 men introduced themselves as behavioral consultants. Everyone smiled with practiced professionalism. Then my eyes settled on the man sitting nearest the head of the table. He remained seated while everyone else stood. His charcoal gray suit was immaculate. Silver cufflinks reflected the soft dining room lights. His posture never shifted, and his expression remained calm enough to make it impossible to guess what he was thinking. Mr. Kalen Voren, he said smoothly. I've heard wonderful things about you. His voice carried quiet authority. Ronan noticed me watching him. Dad, this is Draven Sorel. The name meant nothing to me. Still, something about him immediately made me uncomfortable. His handshake was firm without being aggressive. His smile appeared genuine at first glance, but it disappeared the instant our hands separated. Throughout dinner he rarely ate, preferring instead to observe everyone around the table. The conversation never focused on family. Instead, the guests asked me surprisingly detailed questions. How was retirement treating me? Had I sold my engineering company entirely? Did I still own commercial property in Northbridge? Was I satisfied with my financial investments? Did I plan to revise my estate documents? Each question sounded innocent on its own. Together, they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. I laughed politely and redirected several conversations, but every topic somehow returned to money, assets, inheritance, or long-term financial planning. What disturbed me most was Ronan. He never interrupted. He never questioned why strangers seemed more interested in my finances than in our reunion. Instead, he quietly watched me answer as though he had expected every question. Dinner finally ended shortly before 10 o'clock. A house attendant escorted me upstairs to an elegant guest bedroom overlooking the eastern gardens. The room itself was luxurious, yet one detail immediately caught my attention. There was no lock on the inside of the bedroom door. I checked twice to be certain. Nothing. Only a polished brass handle. I told myself not to overreact. Perhaps the doors throughout the mansion had been designed that way. Still, I slid a heavy wooden chair beneath the handle before preparing for bed. Sleep refused to come. My thoughts replayed everything that had happened since I arrived. Neris's warning. Ronan's distant behavior. Draven's relentless interest in my finances. The strange collection of consultants living inside the mansion. Around 2:15 in the morning, a faint sound broke the silence. 3 soft knocks. Not loud. Not hurried. Almost cautious. I quietly removed the chair and opened the door just enough to see into the dim hallway. Neris stood outside holding an unfamiliar mobile phone against her chest. Her breathing was uneven. She looked over both shoulders before whispering, "Please, don't ask questions yet. Just let me inside." The moment Neris stepped inside my room, she quietly closed the door behind her without making a sound. She didn't switch on the lights. Instead, she pulled the curtains together and carefully checked every corner of the room before speaking. Her movements weren't those of a frightened employee. They were the habits of someone who had spent months expecting to be watched. "I'm sorry for frightening you earlier," she whispered. "But if anyone had seen me warn you, I wouldn't still be working here." I studied her face in the dim light coming from the bedside lamp. She couldn't have been older than 30. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, but dark circles beneath her eyes suggested she rarely slept well. She looked exhausted, not from hard work, but from carrying a burden she had been unable to share with anyone. "Who are you afraid of?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she raised the phone she had been holding. This belonged to someone named Elias Marin. The name meant nothing to me. "He worked here." She nodded. "He was Draven Sorel's executive assistant for nearly 4 years. 6 months ago, he disappeared." "What do you mean disappeared?" "No resignation. No farewell. One day he packed a single bag, left the estate before sunrise, and never returned. Draven told everyone Elias had accepted a position overseas, but no one believed him. His apartment remained untouched. His bank accounts were frozen. Even his sister couldn't find him." A chill ran through me. Neris unlocked the phone using a 6-digit code she had memorized. The screen illuminated the room with a pale glow. "He left this hidden behind a loose panel inside the library. I found it while cleaning." She opened a folder simply labeled private. Dozens of audio files appeared on the screen. "So many," I murmured. "He copied everything before he vanished." She pressed play. At first I heard ordinary office conversations, financial reports, appointment schedules, investment strategies. Then another recording began. A calm, unmistakable voice filled the room. "Draven Sorel. We don't separate families by force," he said. "Force creates resistance. Doubt creates obedience. Make the child question every memory. Encourage distance slowly. Isolation is always more effective when the victim believes it was their own decision." My heartbeat quickened. The recording continued. "Parents with extensive assets become easier to influence once emotional bonds are weakened. They stop communicating. They stop comparing stories. That's when financial restructuring becomes possible." I looked at Neris in disbelief. "This can't be real." "I wish it weren't." She opened another recording. This time Draven spoke to several unidentified people during what sounded like a private training session. "Never attack a parent directly. Convince the son or daughter that maintaining distance is healthy. Label concern as manipulation. Label advice as control. Once trust collapses, our clients become completely dependent on our guidance. The recording ended. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Every unanswered phone call, every unopened letter, every year of silence, a terrible possibility formed in my mind. Are you telling me Ronan was manipulated? Nearest lowered her eyes. I believe so. But why my son? She took a slow breath. Because he became successful very quickly. Wealth attracts people who don't value relationships. Draven studies individuals with influence, business connections, inheritance, or investment portfolios. He offers exclusive psychological consulting services to executives. Most people think he's helping them improve their lives. But he's destroying them. She nodded once. He convinces them that everyone close to them is secretly holding them back. I leaned against the side of the bed, struggling to process everything I had heard. None of it sounded believable. Yet every recording sounded authentic. Every sentence explained pieces of the puzzle I had failed to understand for 2 years. Neera scrolled farther through the phone. There are videos too. She opened one recorded inside a conference room. Draven stood before a digital presentation displaying photographs of several families. The faces had been marked with colored notes. Communication level, financial access, emotional dependence, influence probability. Each category was scored like business statistics. Then my breathing stopped. One photograph appeared larger than the others. It showed Ronan standing beside me during my retirement celebration 3 years earlier. Our names were displayed beneath the image. Project candidate, Voran family. I felt my stomach tighten. We were being studied. Nearest looked away. For a long time. She opened another encrypted folder. Inside were profiles of at least 6 additional families. Every one of them followed the same pattern. Successful parents, adult children, sudden estrangement, financial restructuring, business transfers. In several files, elderly parents had eventually signed away investment authority to organizations connected to Draven's consulting company. They lost everything, Nearest whispered. Some even believed it had been their own idea. I could barely think. If these records were genuine, Draven wasn't simply manipulating emotions. He was operating an organized system that quietly dismantled families for profit. My first instinct was to leave immediately and contact the police. We have enough evidence, I said. Nearest grabbed my arm before I reached the door. No. Her voice shook. Not yet. Why? Because someone else is already helping us. Before she could explain what she meant, we both heard footsteps approaching from the hallway. Not one person. Several. The footsteps stopped directly outside my bedroom door. Then the handle began turning slowly. Someone was trying to come inside. The bedroom door opened only a few inches before stopping against the heavy chair I had wedged beneath the handle earlier. Whoever stood outside pushed again, harder this time, causing the chair to scrape loudly across the polished wooden floor. Nearest froze beside me, her face turning pale. Without saying a word, she quickly slipped the phone into the inside pocket of my jacket. Don't let them find it, she whispered. The knocking stopped. For several long seconds, complete silence filled the room. Then a calm voice spoke from the hallway. Mr. Voran? It was Ronan. I heard a noise. Are you all right? I looked toward Nearest. She slowly nodded, signaling that I should answer normally. I'm fine, I replied. The chair slipped while I was trying to sleep. There was another pause. May I come in? I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to open the door, but refusing might only create suspicion. I pulled the chair aside while Nearest quietly stepped into the bathroom and left the door slightly open behind her. When I opened the bedroom door, Ronan stood outside wearing the same calm expression he had worn throughout dinner. Behind him stood 2 security guards, both dressed in dark suits instead of uniforms. I didn't mean to wake you, Ronan said politely. You already did. His eyes briefly wandered around the room. I thought I heard voices. I've been talking to myself, I answered with a tired smile. Old habit. One of the guards glanced toward the bathroom door. For a split second I thought everything was over. Before he could move, Ronan unexpectedly raised his hand. That's enough, he told the guards. Mr. Voren is our guest. The guards immediately stepped back. Ronan looked at me once more. We'll speak tomorrow morning. Then he walked away without another word. Only after his footsteps disappeared did Nearest emerge from the bathroom. He almost caught us, she whispered. I nodded, still trying to understand something that had just happened. If Ronan was completely under Draven's influence, why had he stopped the guards from searching my room? The question remained unanswered. Neither of us slept for the rest of the night. Just after sunrise, someone slipped a folded piece of paper beneath my bedroom door. There was no signature. Only 4 handwritten words. Library. 9 o'clock. Alone. Nearest examined the note carefully. I didn't write this. Could Draven have sent it? She shook her head. If he wanted to confront you, he wouldn't be this subtle. At precisely 9 o'clock, I walked toward the mansion's enormous library while trying to appear relaxed. The room occupied nearly an entire wing of the house. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with thousands of books that looked as though few had ever been opened. Sunlight entered through tall windows, casting long shadows across polished oak tables. At first glance, the room appeared empty. Then I heard a quiet voice behind one of the shelves. Mr. Voren. A woman stepped into view. She wore ordinary business clothing rather than a police uniform, yet everything about her posture suggested discipline and confidence. My name is Mireia Solis. She extended a small identification wallet. I examined the badge inside. Criminal Investigation Division. I looked back at her. You're a police officer? Inspector, she corrected calmly. And before you ask, yes, my identification is genuine. My mind raced with questions. How did you get inside this estate? I've been inside for 3 days. Seeing my confusion, she gave a faint smile. I wasn't invited. She explained that several officers were conducting a long-term covert investigation into Draven Sorel and his consulting organization. For nearly 18 months, authorities had received reports from wealthy families who described nearly identical experiences. Adult children suddenly severed communication with their parents. Financial authority shifted toward companies connected to Draven's organization. Victims often believed they had made every decision willingly, making criminal prosecution nearly impossible. We've suspected psychological coercion, Inspector Solis said quietly. The problem is proving it. I reached inside my jacket and carefully removed Elias Marin's phone. Her expression immediately changed. Where did you get that? Nearest found it. Inspector Solis took the phone carefully, as though she had just been handed something priceless. You have no idea how important this is. She quickly scrolled through several files before letting out a slow breath. This is the evidence we've been missing. She looked directly into my eyes. Elias risked everything collecting these recordings. Is he alive? Her silence answered the question before she spoke. We honestly don't know. A heavy sadness settled over the room. So what happens now? I asked. We continue exactly as planned. What plan? The invitation your son sent you wasn't an accident. I stared at her. What do you mean? Ronan mailed it himself, but only after someone convinced him that seeing you again might help him confront inconsistencies in his own memories. Who convinced him? I did. The words left me speechless. Inspector Solis continued. Your son has been under Draven's influence for nearly 2 years, but recently he began questioning certain events. Small contradictions started appearing. He contacted someone anonymously through an encrypted counseling forum. That anonymous contact was me. So Ronan knows you're here? He knows someone is helping him. She paused before adding, but he doesn't yet know I'm a police officer. Before I could respond, every light inside the library suddenly went dark. A loud electronic tone echoed throughout the mansion. Then a calm voice emerged from hidden ceiling speakers. Attention everyone. It was Draven Sorel. Our security system has detected unauthorized activity. Inspector Solis looked toward the ceiling with narrowed eyes. He knows. A second announcement followed almost immediately. For everyone's safety, all exterior exits have now been secured until further notice. The trap had just closed around every person inside the mansion. The emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the library in a cold white glow. Every exit door clicked as electronic locks engaged throughout the mansion. The announcement echoed one final time before silence returned, but it was no longer the peaceful silence I had noticed when I first arrived. This silence carried tension. Somewhere beyond the library walls, footsteps began moving rapidly through the corridors. Inspector Mireya Solis slipped the phone back into my hand. "Keep this hidden," she said. "If they find it, 18 months of work disappear with it." "What about you?" "I have another job to finish." She reached inside her jacket and produced a small communication device no larger than a key fob. Pressing a single button, she spoke in a controlled voice. "Alpha Team, this is Solis. We've been compromised. Initiate contingency route." Only Static answered. Her expression hardened. "They're blocking the signal." Before either of us could react, the library doors swung open. 4 security guards entered first, spreading across the room with practiced precision. Behind them walked Draven Sorel. He looked exactly as he had during dinner. Perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect smile. Only his eyes had changed. There was no longer any reason for him to pretend kindness. "Inspector Solis," he said pleasantly, "I was wondering how long it would take before you introduced yourself." She remained calm. "You've known." "I suspected." He smiled faintly. "You underestimate how carefully I observe the people around me." His gaze shifted toward me. "And Mr. Voren, I had hoped your visit would be less complicated." "You manipulated my son," I said. "I offered guidance. You destroyed families. I helped people free themselves from emotional dependency." His answer came without hesitation, as though he had repeated those words countless times. Inspector Solis stepped slightly forward. "Your recordings tell a different story." For the first time, Draven's smile faded. "So you found Elias's archive?" He looked almost impressed. "I've searched for that phone for months." He nodded toward the guards. "Retrieve it." The guards advanced. Instinctively, I stepped backward. Before they reached us, another voice interrupted. "Stop." Everyone turned. Ronan stood in the doorway. His breathing was uneven, as though he had run across the mansion. He looked directly at Draven. "No one touches my father." The room fell silent. Draven's expression remained composed. "Ronan, you're allowing emotion to cloud your judgment." "My judgment?" Ronan laughed bitterly. "For 2 years you told me my father manipulated me. You believed the evidence. I believed what you wanted me to believe." He slowly walked toward us. "I started remembering things last month. Small details that didn't match your version of events." Draven folded his hands behind his back. "False memories often appear during recovery." "No," Ronan replied firmly. "Real memories." He looked at me. I remembered every Sunday phone call. I remembered every time Dad supported me without asking for anything in return. His voice trembled. Then I realized something. He turned back toward Draven. "Every memory you encouraged me to question involved someone who genuinely cared about me." None of the guards moved. Even they seemed uncertain. Draven sighed quietly. "I gave you independence. You gave me isolation. You became successful because you learned to stop relying on weak emotional attachments. I became lonely." Those 3 words echoed through the library. For the first time since arriving at Blackridge Estate, I saw genuine emotion in my son's eyes. Regret, confusion, shame. Draven glanced toward the guards again. "This discussion is over." Before anyone obeyed, the sound of shattering glass exploded somewhere downstairs. Then another. Several loud commands echoed through the mansion. "Federal investigators." "No one move." The guards looked toward the hallway in alarm. Inspector Solis smiled for the first time. "They found the service in trance." Draven's calm composure finally cracked. "Impossible. Nearest left it unlocked 20 minutes ago," Solis replied. Within seconds, heavily armed investigators flooded the corridor outside the library. Officers secured each guard before they could react. 2 investigators immediately approached Draven. He made no attempt to run. Instead, he quietly adjusted one of his cufflinks. "You think arresting me changes anything?" he asked. Inspector Solis answered without raising her voice. "It changes everything." Investigators spread throughout the mansion, opening hidden offices concealed behind decorative walls. Locked cabinets revealed encrypted hard drives, confidential client files, forged legal documents, and financial records linking dozens of shell companies to Draven's consulting empire. Every room uncovered another layer of the operation. By noon, evidence boxes lined the entrance hall where I had first met Nearest. As officers documented every discovery, Ronan stood beside me in silence. Finally he spoke. "I'm afraid to ask you something." "What is it?" "After everything I've done." His voice nearly broke. "Is it too late for you to forgive me?" I looked at my son, seeing not the confident businessman who had ignored me for 2 years, but the frightened little boy who once asked me to teach him how to ride a bicycle after falling over again and again. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "It's too late to get those years back." He lowered his head. "But it's not too late to stop losing more." For the first time in 2 years, Ronan embraced me without hesitation. This time he didn't let go after 3 seconds. He held on until neither of us had any tears left to hide. 3 months passed after the raid at Blackridge Estate, yet I still woke some mornings expecting the past 2 years to have been nothing more than a terrible dream. Healing, however, refused to follow a schedule. Some days Ronan and I could sit together for hours, talking about ordinary things as though nothing had happened. Other days, silence settled between us because neither of us knew how to fill the empty space left by 24 stolen months. We both understood that rebuilding trust would take patience. Unlike deception, trust could not be restored overnight. The investigation against Draven Sorel quickly became one of the largest financial and psychological abuse cases in recent history. News outlets covered every court hearing. Former clients who had once defended him suddenly admitted they had ignored warning signs because they believed his methods produced success. Investigators uncovered confidential files belonging to dozens of influential families across several states. Every folder revealed the same carefully repeated pattern. Adult children were encouraged to question loving parents. Honest concern was labeled emotional control. Family traditions were described as manipulation. Once relationships weakened, financial advisors connected to Draven quietly redirected investments, property ownership, and legal authority through complicated corporate structures that benefited his organization. The evidence hidden inside Elias Marin's phone became the foundation of the prosecution. His recordings exposed private strategy meetings that Draven had believed would never become public. Every calculated instruction, every training session, and every discussion about separating families was played inside the courtroom. Jurors listened in complete silence as Draven calmly explained how isolation created compliance. Hearing those recordings in public felt completely different from hearing them secretly inside my bedroom. This time there was nowhere for the truth to hide. Draven never admitted guilt. Throughout the trial he insisted he had merely offered professional guidance to ambitious clients seeking emotional independence. His attorneys argued that every financial decision had been signed voluntarily. That defense collapsed once investigators matched the recordings with testimony from victims who described nearly identical experiences. Independent psychologists explained how repeated emotional manipulation could reshape a person's perception without physical force. Former employees also came forward after realizing the organization could no longer protect them. They described secret performance reviews where consultants were rewarded for creating deeper divisions between family members. Every new witness strengthened the case until denial became impossible. The court sentenced Draven to decades in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, financial exploitation, obstruction of justice, and multiple related offenses. His consulting empire dissolved within weeks. Luxury offices closed their doors. Business partners canceled contracts. Investors demanded restitution. Several executives who had once praised his leadership accepted plea agreements after providing additional evidence. Watching the organization collapse reminded me that even the strongest-looking structures eventually fail when they are built on lies instead of integrity. One afternoon, several weeks after the sentencing, Ronan invited me to visit a small lakeside cabin he had recently purchased. It was nothing like the enormous estate where we had reunited. There were no security gates, no surveillance cameras watching every movement, and no strangers pretending to know what was best for our family. The cabin overlooked a quiet lake surrounded by tall pine trees. We spent the afternoon repairing an old wooden dock together. The work was simple, but every shared conversation felt like another step toward becoming father and son again instead of strangers connected only by blood. While tightening a loose board, Ronan stopped working and looked across the water. "I still don't understand how I believed him for so long," he admitted. I set my tools aside before answering. "People like Draven don't begin with obvious lies. They begin with small doubts." He nodded slowly. "I remember questioning one memory at a time, then another. Eventually I couldn't tell which thoughts were mine anymore." "You found your way back." "I almost didn't." His honesty hurt to hear because I knew it was true. Later that evening we visited Inspector Mireia Solis at a community event honoring investigators and civilian witnesses who had helped expose the organization. Nearisvale was there as well. She no longer wore a maid's uniform. Instead, she worked with a non-profit organization that helped victims recognize emotional manipulation before it destroyed their relationships. Watching her confidently speak to families reminded me how much courage it had taken for her to whisper that warning on the day I arrived. A single quiet sentence had changed the direction of countless lives. Before leaving, Elias Marin's sister approached us. Authorities had finally confirmed that Elias had died while attempting to escape Draven's organization months before I ever received Ronan's letter. The news weighed heavily on everyone who had known his story. Without his decision to preserve those recordings, many more families might have suffered the same fate. We stood together in silence, grateful for a man most of us had never met, but whose bravery had exposed the truth. As another year slowly unfolded, Ronan and I established new traditions instead of trying to recreate old ones. Every Sunday evening he visited my house for dinner, just as he had before everything changed. Sometimes we laughed about small mistakes while repairing furniture in my garage. Sometimes we argued about baseball scores or politics. Ordinary disagreements no longer frightened either of us because healthy families do not need perfect agreement to remain close. We had learned that honest conversations, even uncomfortable ones, were stronger than silence. Looking back now, I understand that losing 2 years of my son's life will always remain one of my greatest sorrows. Nothing can return birthdays we missed, holidays spent apart, or phone calls that never came. But I also learned something equally important. Love is not measured only by the years we keep. It is measured by the decision to rebuild when rebuilding feels impossible.